I brought the envelope to Helen's oak table and spread the 18 withdrawal forms across the polished surface. The afternoon light caught the ink variations I'd been trained to spot. My signatures. Except I never signed any of them. I brought the magnifying glass to Form 1, dated September 2022. $8,000 for Mason's leg braces. Vanessa's pen pressure was too light, hesitant. My capital D always loops counterclockwise. Hers went clockwise. Form 4 included my middle initial, W for Winston. I haven't used that initial in a signature since my Air Force discharge papers in 1982. I marked each failure in the margins with my fountain pen. Wrong baseline angle on Form 6. Inconsistent stroke width on Form 11. Amateur work that fooled people who didn't spend 30 years examining forged documents for the Postal Inspection Service. The math came to $340,000. Stolen between September 2022 and March 2024. 18 months while Mason's therapy sessions were discontinued for non-payment. While Vanessa posted photos of designer handbags and European vacations on Instagram. I set the magnifying glass beside Form 18 and picked up my phone. I called Claire Ostrowski. I have 18 documents requiring forensic analysis. Tomorrow morning. The pause told me she understood. Understood, Claire said. Second call went to Vanessa. I've been thinking about what you said, I told her. About moving forward. Why don't you and Kyle come for Sunday dinner? We can clear the air. Her voice brightened, words coming faster. Patrick, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. We'll be there at 6. I set my phone beside the magnifying glass and returned to the forms. 17 more signatures to document before Sunday. 17 more pieces of evidence. Support the channel in one move, tap subscribe, and keep listening. I spent 30 years with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service analyzing forged signatures. Started in 1992 when mail fraud still meant paper trails and mechanical typewriters. By the time I retired in 2022, we were tracking digital forgeries and blockchain scams, but the fundamentals never changed. I could spot a forged signature from stroke width alone. Pen pressure doesn't lie. Neither does baseline angle. I worked major cases. Check forgery rings operating across state lines. Identity theft operations targeting veterans' benefits. Mail fraud schemes that bilked seniors out of retirement savings. 43 court testimonies. Never lost a case. Built evidence packages that met federal prosecution standards. The service taught me to think systematically. Document everything. Follow the paper trail. Trust the evidence, not your assumptions. Those habits became part of how I moved through the world, even after I turned in my badge. I met Helen at a church social in 1978. Spring potluck in the parish hall, tables covered with casseroles and sheet cakes. She was arranging desserts by type with the same systematic precision I'd later see her apply to everything. Cookies with cookies, pies with pies, brownies in their own section. I asked if she'd designed a filing system for the baked goods. She looked at me for 3 seconds, expression serious, then smiled. First time I saw that smile. We were married 6 months later. Helen worked part-time at the Toledo Public Library, reshelving books and helping patrons find what they needed. Said she liked the quiet and the order. My postal inspection salary covered the mortgage on our ranch house in a modest suburb. We raised Kyle there, taught him to mow the lawn properly, helped with homework at the kitchen table, attended his soccer games on Saturdays. Nothing fancy, but ours. Kyle followed my work ethic but chose trucking over federal service. Got his CDL at 22 and started driving long-haul routes. Married Vanessa in 2015. She sold real estate, luxury properties, she said, though I noticed her commission checks never matched the lifestyle she projected on social media. Mason was born in 2007 with cerebral palsy. The diagnosis came 3 days after delivery. Doctors explained motor skill challenges, speech delays, therapy requirements stretching years ahead, medical costs that would strain any working family's budget. Kyle took extra routes to cover expenses. Vanessa smiled for her Instagram followers while posting photos with Mason that she captioned with heart emojis and hashtags about blessed motherhood. But I watched her face when she didn't know anyone was looking. The way her smile disappeared the moment she turned away from the camera. How she'd hand Mason to Kyle without meeting the boy's eyes. She wanted a different life than the one cerebral palsy required. Helen noticed too, never said anything directly, but she started visiting more often. Bringing meals, offering to watch Mason so Kyle and Vanessa could have date nights. Trying to ease the burden she could see building. Helen's cancer diagnosis came in January 2022, stage IV. The oncologist used words like aggressive and metastatic and limited treatment options. 6 months, maybe 8, if the chemo worked. She made an appointment with Brian Yates the next day. Her younger brother, the estate attorney who'd handled our wills years earlier, said she needed to update everything. I took early retirement at 65 to care for her through what came next. The service approved it without question. 30 years of service earned certain courtesies. Helen spent her final months planning Mason's future with the same organizational precision she'd brought to arranging desserts at that church social. She created spreadsheets projecting his medical needs through age 18, therapy schedules, surgical timelines for procedures his doctors recommended, equipment costs for leg braces and mobility aids, and adaptive technologies. She researched everything, called specialists, calculated inflation rates for medical expenses, built a comprehensive plan for a child she wouldn't live to see grow up. Brian drafted the trust documents according to her specifications. $400,000 from life insurance proceeds and the sale of rental property her parents had left her, structured to generate modest interest while preserving principal for Mason's projected needs. I pulled Helen's leather journal from the shelf beside the forms. Her handwriting steadied me, reminded me why this mattered. I watched her work through this during her last good weeks, before the pain medications made her too foggy to focus. She filled the journal with handwritten notes, her script growing shakier as cancer progressed, but her determination never wavering. One entry near the end, written when her hand could barely hold the pen, only for Mason's medical needs. Never anything else. Patrick will understand this matters. The trust was established at First National Bank in March 2022, 3 months before she died. I was named sole trustee with authority to approve disbursements. Any withdrawal over $1,000 required my signature on an authorization form. Helen wanted those safeguards in place, Said it ensured the money served its intended purpose without confusion or misuse. She died in June 2022. Hospice nurse called me at 4 in the morning. Said Helen had passed peacefully an hour earlier, no pain at the end. The house felt wrong after that. Too quiet. Her books still organized by color on the shelves. Her butterfly collection displayed in shadow boxes she'd arranged throughout the living room. Her reading chair by the window where she'd spent afternoons with novels and crossword puzzles. I couldn't bring myself to move anything. Kyle helped with the funeral arrangements. Vanessa brought casseroles I didn't eat and offered to handle my paperwork during this difficult time. Said she knew how overwhelming estate administration could be for someone grieving. I thanked her and declined. Told her I'd managed federal case files for 3 decades. I could handle my own documents. She smiled that practiced real estate smile and said, of course, she just wanted to help family. I stopped sleeping through the night. Started finding myself in her reading chair at 3 a.m., unable to remember walking there. I stopped attending the cancer support group's memorial gatherings. Stopped calling old colleagues from the service. Let my workshop in the garage become my primary residence, restoring vintage fountain pens I'd collected over the years. The workshop smelled of linseed oil and metal polish. 200 pens in glass front cabinets, each one catalogued with acquisition date, manufacturer, restoration notes. I'd started the collection during my postal inspection career, finding meditative peace in the precision mechanics. Disassembling a pen, cleaning decades of dried ink from feed channels, replacing worn nibs, calibrating ink flow to factory specifications. The work demanded systematic attention. Left no room for thinking about Helen's empty reading chair or her butterfly collection. I still couldn't pack away. Bank statements piled up unopened in my home office. Monthly trust fund reports I should have reviewed sat in their envelopes while I spent evenings in the workshop with my magnifying glass and restoration tools. I told myself I'd get to the paperwork eventually. After the grief eased. After I could face the administrative details without seeing Helen's handwriting on the trust documents she'd spent her dying months perfecting. Vanessa called occasionally during those months, checking on me, she said, making sure I was eating properly and not spending too much time alone. Suggested I might enjoy an assisted living community where I'd have built-in social opportunities and wouldn't need to maintain the house alone. I thanked her for the concern and said I was managing fine. I didn't review the First National Bank statements piling up in my office. Didn't see the monthly disbursement notices for Mason's therapy sessions I'd never authorized. Looking back now, I can see how my grief-induced retreat created the perfect opportunity. A widower lost in mourning, avoiding family contact, not reviewing his financial statements. Someone who looked vulnerable because he'd stopped engaging with the world outside his workshop. Vanessa saw weakness where there was only sadness. She didn't know the same training that built my career had also built habits. Documentation protocols, systematic thinking, forensic attention to detail that becomes part of how you process information. She didn't know that Helen's planning had taught me to honor precision as an expression of love. That every spreadsheet Helen created, every medical projection she calculated during her final months, represented a dying grandmother's determination to protect her grandson's future. I sat in my workshop that evening after calling Claire and Vanessa. 200 restored fountain pens surrounding me in their catalogued precision. Helen's leather journal on the workbench beside my tools, her shakier handwriting visible through the open pages. Her instructions were clear, only for Mason's medical needs. Never anything else. 17 more forged signatures to document before Sunday dinner. 17 more violations of Helen's dying wishes to catalog with the same systematic attention I'd brought to 3 decades of federal cases. The work would honor what she'd tried to build. What Vanessa had stolen while I mourned. August 22. 2 months after Helen's funeral, Vanessa started offering to help with my paperwork. She appeared at my door on a Saturday morning, holding a casserole dish and wearing what I'd learned to recognize as her concerned daughter-in-law expression. Said she'd been thinking about how overwhelming estate administration must be for someone grieving, and she had experience organizing financial documents through her real estate work. I thanked her and said I was managing. She set the casserole on my kitchen counter and glanced at the stack of unopened mail beside the coffee maker. Bank statements mostly. Trust fund reports I hadn't gotten around to reviewing. "Patrick, you shouldn't have to deal with all this alone," she said. "Let me at least help sort through the banking stuff. Make sure everything's current." I looked at the mail pile and felt tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from sleeping 3 hours a night and spending the rest wandering through a house that felt wrong without Helen in it. "That's kind of you," I said. She smiled and picked up the first envelope. Over the next 6 weeks, Vanessa visited regularly. Always when Kyle was on long-haul routes to Colorado or Montana, gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. She'd arrive with food I didn't eat and offers to help organize the paperwork I couldn't bring myself to review. I watched her study my signature on old bank statements. The way her eyes traced the capital D and the baseline angle. How she'd photograph certain documents with her phone, claiming she wanted to remember the account numbers so she could help track things properly. At the time, I thought it was thoughtful. A daughter-in-law trying to ease an old man's burden during grief. I didn't recognize systematic reconnaissance when it was happening in my own kitchen. The first theft occurred in September 22. $8,000 for Mason's new leg braces, according to the withdrawal form I'd later examine with my magnifying glass. Mason did need new braces that cost exactly $8,000. His pediatric orthopedist had recommended custom fittings in August. If Vanessa had simply brought me the invoice, I would have processed the disbursement within 24 hours. But she never asked. She forged my signature at the bank's lobby writing counter, practiced enough times on blank deposit slips to produce something that fooled the newer teller who didn't know our family history. The teller who'd started 3 weeks earlier, tested whether anyone would notice, whether the bank's fraud detection would flag an unauthorized withdrawal, whether I'd review the monthly statement sitting unopened on my kitchen counter. No alarm sounded. No calls from Margaret Chen asking if I'd authorized the disbursement. No fraud alerts on the account. Just $8,000 moved from Mason's medical trust to Vanessa's personal account, converting his grandmother's dying gift into whatever she wanted to buy. The theft worked, so she did it again. November brought $12,000 for specialized therapy equipment. I'd find the withdrawal form later, my forged signature showing more confidence than the first attempt. Her pen pressure still too light, but the overall shape closer to accurate. I spent that month in my workshop, restoring a 1934 Parker duofold I'd found at an estate sale, disassembling the barrel, cleaning decades of dried ink from the feed channels, replacing the deteriorated ink sac. The precision mechanics demanded attention that left no room for thinking about Helen's empty reading chair or the bank statements piling up in my office. The workshop smelled of linseed oil and metal polish. 200 catalogued pens surrounded me in their glass front cabinets, while my trust fund statements sat unopened 3 rooms away. January 2023 saw $15,000 leave the account. Surgical consultation, according to Vanessa's forged authorization. Mason's doctors had mentioned potential procedures years down the road, so the expense seemed plausible to anyone who didn't verify the claim with actual medical providers. The cancer support group's memorial gatherings happened without me. My colleagues from the service got voicemails. They quit returning after the 3rd month. Some nights I woke at 3 a.m. in Helen's reading chair, no memory of walking there. The bedroom upstairs remained dark. My isolation deepened while Vanessa's Instagram documented her transformation. I would discover this pattern months later, when Claire pulled her social media history. Designer handbag photos appeared within 48 hours of trust fund withdrawals. A Prada tote tagged with #TreatYourself posted 2 days after the September theft. Louis Vuitton shoulder bag captioned #BossBabeLifestyle exactly 73 hours after the November withdrawal. March 2023 brought the largest single theft. $35,000 supposedly for Mason's care, actually funding Vanessa's 3-week European vacation that she chronicled across Instagram with professional photography and inspirational captions about deserving success. Photos of her in Paris, Rome, Barcelona, designer clothes against famous landmarks, wine tastings and 5-star hotels and business-class flight selfies. Every image captioned with hashtags about #self-care and #living-my-best-life, while Mason's therapy bills went unpaid. Kyle came home from his Denver route on March 23, 2023. 3 days back between 3-week hauls. He mentioned Vanessa seemed different. Lighter, he said, like a weight had lifted. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? His wife seemed successful. Their house was getting nicer. Her wardrobe improved. Good commission months explained everything to someone who spent 3 weeks at a time behind the wheel of a Peterbilt. He didn't check her actual sales figures. Didn't notice that at Vanessa Drummond Homes posted far more photos of designer purchases than property closings. Vanessa cultivated her bank relationships during this period, learned which tellers were new, which ones processed transactions without reviewing account history, which days saw the most staffing turnover and the least experienced employees working the transaction counter. She'd studied my signature during those helping with paperwork visits, photographing legitimate signatures on her phone for later reference during her practice attempts on the bank's deposit slips. Free paper, no record. The amounts remained below $20,000 per withdrawal. Careful calculation that avoided triggering additional reporting requirements and enhanced scrutiny protocols. She'd researched the thresholds, planned her thefts to maximize what she could steal while minimizing detection risk. I remained unaware through all of it, trusted that Kyle and Vanessa were managing Mason's day-to-day care while I processed grief through fountain pen mechanics. Assumed the therapy sessions were continuing. Believed the trust fund served its intended purpose because reviewing bank statements required facing administrative details connected to Helen's death, and I wasn't ready for that yet. By early 2024, Vanessa had stolen $340,000 through 18 separate forged withdrawals, each theft bolder than the last. Her confidence growing with every unchallenged signature, every successful manipulation of bank tellers who saw a caring family member instead of a systematic thief. Vanessa made minimum payments on Mason's therapy bills through fall 2023, just enough to keep the sessions active while she diverted the bulk of the trust funds to her personal spending. But by January 2024, even those token payments ceased as her theft escalated and her attention shifted to maintaining her social media image rather than Mason's medical needs. February 2024 brought the consequence that would unravel everything. Mason's therapy sessions at the Pediatric Rehabilitation Center were discontinued due to non-payment. $47,000 in unpaid invoices despite the trust account being established specifically to cover exactly these costs. Payments that should have been automatic, authorized by me as trustee, managed properly to ensure Helen's grandson received the care her dying months had been spent planning. The rehabilitation center had Vanessa's number as primary contact. She deleted their voicemails, told the billing coordinator payment would arrive next week, promised Kyle that medical bills were current when he asked during his brief time home between routes. I didn't know any of it was happening. Remained isolated in my workshop with my restored pens and my unopened bank statements while Vanessa posted Instagram photos of her latest cosmetic procedures. Lip fillers captioned with #self-care, funded by the grandson's discontinued physical therapy. Botox results tagged #invest in yourself, paid for with money Helen had calculated down to the dollar during her final conscious weeks. Looking back now, I can see how my grief-induced withdrawal from family life gave her 18 months of access. A widower isolated from regular contact, avoiding the administrative tasks that reminded him of his wife's death, trusting that others were managing responsibilities he couldn't face examining. Vanessa saw vulnerability where there was only mourning, mistook my temporary isolation for permanent weakness, assumed my systematic thinking had died with Helen, leaving an exploitable old man who wouldn't notice or couldn't fight back. She didn't understand that grief and training were separate things, that 30 years of forensic analysis had built habits that functioned independent of emotional state. That documentation, protocols, and evidence examination skills didn't disappear just because the person who'd given my life meaning was gone. The unopened bank statements sat in my office. The trust fund reports accumulated in their envelopes. The evidence of systematic theft compiled itself while I restored fountain pens and avoided Helen's butterfly collection. But nothing remains buried forever, especially not $47,000 in unpaid medical bills for a disabled child whose therapy had been discontinued while his mother posted vacation photos from Europe. March 2024 would bring the phone call that shattered my isolation and proved that some mistakes can't be hidden by deleting voicemails or manipulating bank tellers or assuming your victim is too grief-stricken to fight back. Margaret Chen called on a Thursday afternoon, March 14th. I was in my workshop, replacing the ink sac on a 1947 Schiefer Triumph, when my phone buzzed against the workbench. I set down the pen barrel. "Mr. Drummond, this is Margaret Chen from First National Bank. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your grandson's trust account." "What kind of activity?" "I'm seeing multiple unauthorized withdrawals. I'm sending you copies of all the forms. Can you review them and call me back? The workshop stayed quiet. My hands remained steady on the workbench. Send them to my home address. Today, if possible. They'll go out this afternoon. I hung up and stood in my workshop for a long time, staring at the 200 catalogued pens in their glass cases. 30 years of postal inspection training had taught me to stay calm when something felt wrong. The envelope arrived 2 days later, Saturday morning. I brought it to Helen's dining table and spread the contents across the polished oak surface. 18 withdrawal authorization forms, each one supposedly bearing my signature approving disbursements from Mason's Medical Trust. I retrieved my magnifying glass from the workshop. Started with Form 1, dated September 22. $8,000 for leg braces according to the description line. I examined the signature under natural light from the window. Wrong. The pen pressure was too light. Hesitant. My capital D always loops counterclockwise from decades of signing federal documents. This one looped clockwise. Form 4 made me stop breathing. Patrick W. Drummond. The middle initial. Winston, after my father. I hadn't used that initial in a signature since my Air Force discharge papers in 1982. 42 years of signing my name without it. Every postal inspection document, every bank form, every legal paper. Just Patrick Drummond. Vanessa had included it on 4 separate forms. I went through the remaining documents. Form 6 showed inconsistent baseline angle. Form 11 had stroke width variations that no genuine signature would display. Amateur work that might fool a bank teller who didn't know better but wouldn't survive 30 seconds of forensic examination by someone trained to spot these failures. I pulled the magnifying glass from my workshop and examined each signature. Marked the failures in my notebook. Wrong baseline angle on Form 6. Inconsistent stroke width on Form 11. The middle initial appearing on Forms 4, 7, 12, and 15. $340,000. Stolen while I restored fountain pens in my workshop and avoided opening bank statements that reminded me Helen was gone. I picked up my phone and called Claire Ostrowski. She answered on the second ring. Patrick, it's been a while. Claire. I have 18 withdrawal authorizations. Signatures don't match. Need forensic confirmation. The pause told me she understood what I wasn't saying. 30 years of working cases together created a language we didn't need to spell out. Bring everything to my consulting office. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Understood. I hung up and dialed the Pediatric Rehabilitation Center where Mason received therapy. The billing coordinator answered. This is Patrick Drummond. I'm trustee for Mason Drummond's Medical Trust Fund. I need to verify the current status of his therapy sessions. Papers shuffled in the background. Mr. Drummond, Mason's sessions were discontinued in mid-February due to non-payment. We have outstanding invoices going back 6 months. The trust account was established specifically to cover those costs. Yes, sir, we were told that. But we haven't received payment despite multiple billing attempts. How much does Mason still owe? $47,312. I closed my eyes. $47,000. Enough for 18 months of Mason's sessions. I thanked her and ended the call. The afternoon light shifted across the withdrawal forms spread on Helen's table. I could see her handwriting in my mind. the leather journal she'd filled during her final months, medical projections for Mason through age 18, therapy schedules, surgical timelines, her shakier script near the end when cancer made holding a pen difficult. One entry I'd read 100 times only for Mason's medical needs. Never anything else. Patrick will understand this matters. I walked to the living room and pulled Helen's leather journal from the shelf. Her handwriting steadied me, reminded me why this mattered beyond the dollar amounts or the forged signatures or even the discontinued therapy sessions. This was about honoring what she'd tried to build, what she'd spent her last conscious weeks perfecting, while I held her hand and watched her fade. Something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly, something colder, clearer. I stood and walked to my workshop. 200 restored fountain pens surrounded me in their glass cases, each one documented with acquisition date, manufacturer, restoration notes. Systems I'd built because systematic thinking turns chaos into order. Helen had taught me that precision was an expression of love. Every spreadsheet she created, every medical cost she calculated during her dying months, represented a grandmother's determination to protect her grandson's future. Vanessa had stolen that. Not just money, Helen's final act of mothering. Her last gift to the boy she wouldn't live to see grow up. I set the journal back on its shelf and returned to the dining table. 17 more signatures to document before my meeting with Claire tomorrow. 17 more violations to catalog with the same systematic attention I'd brought to 3 decades of fraud investigations. The evidence would honor what Helen tried to protect, what Vanessa thought she could steal while an old man mourned. I arrived at Claire's home office Sunday morning as planned, carried 2 file boxes and the 18 withdrawal forms I'd examined at Helen's dining table. Claire opened the door before I knocked. Same gray pantsuit she'd worn to every consultation for 30 years. Steel-rimmed glasses caught the light when she bent to examine the boxes. Patrick, Claire. She stepped aside, and I followed her through the bungalow to the converted sunroom. Dual monitors glowed on her desk beside filing cabinets that reached the ceiling. In the corner sat her Victorian dollhouse, 3 stories with hand-carved furniture and wallpaper she'd printed herself. Each tiny room arranged with the same precision she brought to forensic analysis. I set the boxes on her work table. Claire pulled the first withdrawal form from the top box and held it under her desk lamp. She studied it for 10 seconds without speaking. Amateur work, she said. Pen pressures inconsistent. Your capital D loops counterclockwise. This one goes clockwise. I know. You need forensic confirmation, or you wouldn't be here. I need federal prosecution standards. She pulled the remaining forms from the box and spread them across her work table. Her fingers moved quickly, organizing by date, arranging them in chronological sequence. 18 forms, 18 separate felonies, if these are what I think they are. I pulled Helen's trust documents from the second box and set them beside the forms. Claire read through the trust agreement. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. Your late wife established this 3 months before she died. March 2022. And the first forged withdrawal is dated September 2022. 2 months after her funeral. Yes. Claire picked up Form 4 and held it next to my driver's license. This one has your middle initial. Winston, when's the last time you signed your name with a middle initial? Air Force discharge papers. 1982. She set the form down and turned to her computer. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, opening signature analysis software I recognized from our postal inspection days. I'm going to scan these and run comparative overlays. Measure pen pressure, baseline angle, stroke timing. Give me 2 hours. I sat in the chair by her dollhouse while she worked. The printer hum filled the quiet room. Coffee smell drifted from the pot she'd started before I arrived. My phone buzzed. Text from Kyle asking if I wanted to grab lunch next week when he got back from his Phoenix route. I typed a response saying that sounded good, then deleted it. Sent nothing instead. Claire's printer started running at 10,047. She pulled sheets from the tray and brought them to the work table. Look at this. She laid out comparison overlays showing my legitimate signatures from bank records next to Vanessa's forgeries. Red lines highlighted the discrepancies. Baseline angles off by 3 degrees. Pen pressure variations measuring 40% lighter than my actual signatures. Letter formations that approximated the shape but missed the muscle memory patterns. Built over decades of signing the same way. Statistical analysis gives these less than 2% probability of being your genuine signatures. Claire tapped her screen. That's mathematical certainty of forgery. Will it hold up in court? Federal court, state court, traffic court. Quote, these overlays meet every evidentiary standard. But there's something else. She pulled up her email and opened an attachment. Margaret Chen sent me security footage from First National Bank. March 14th. Watch. The video showed the bank lobby from an overhead angle. Timestamp read 2047. PM Vanessa sat at the writing counter with a withdrawal form in front of her. She had blank deposit slips spread beside it. She practiced my signature. Once, twice, checked her phone, practiced again. 6 attempts before she achieved something she considered acceptable. Then she filled out the withdrawal form using that practiced signature. She's on camera preparing to forge. Claire looked at me over her glasses. This isn't circumstantial. This is documented intent. I watched the video 3 more times. Vanessa checking her phone between practice attempts. I could see what she was looking at. Photographed examples of my legitimate signatures from documents she'd studied during those helping with paperwork visits. Can you correlate the withdrawals with her spending? Claire smiled without warmth. Already started. Give me another hour. She worked while I sat with the dollhouse. 3 perfect floors. Hand-painted wallpaper in the bedroom. Tiny books on shelves in the library. Everything ordered. Everything in its place. Claire printed new spreadsheets at noon. Timeline correlation between trust withdrawals and your daughter-in-law's luxury purchases. Every disbursement links to spending within 24 to 72 hours. She laid out the documentation. $8,000 withdrawn, September 12, 2022. Vanessa's Instagram showed a Prada handbag post dated September 14, 2022. Caption reading, treat yourself, #bossbabe. 12,000 withdrawn, November 3, 22. Louis Vuitton shoulder bag posted November 5, 2022. 35,000 withdrawn, March 8, 2023. European vacation photos spanning March 10 through March 28. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. 5-star hotels and business-class flights documented with geotagged posts and professional photography. Total theft is $340,000. Claire pulled up another spreadsheet. Broken down, $47,000 in designer handbags, $35,000 European vacation, $35,000 luxury SUV down payment, $18,000 cosmetic procedures, $12,000 Cartier bracelet. She documented everything on Instagram with timestamps and location tags. She posted evidence of her own crimes. Claire turned back to her computer. People do that now. I pulled my phone and called Mason's therapy center. Asked for the director. She answered within 30 seconds. Mr. Drummond, I was hoping to hear from you. I need written documentation of Mason's discontinued services and the unpaid invoices. I'll have everything ready this afternoon. But there's something else you should know. I waited. Your wife visited in May 2022. She was very ill, but she came anyway. She arranged Mason's entire therapy schedule through 2024, prepaid 6 months to ensure continuity after she passed. The director's voice caught. She made me promise we'd take care of him. My hand tightened on the phone. When did the prepaid sessions run out? November 2022. We kept him active through January 2024 on minimum payments. But those stopped too. I set the papers down and walked to the window. Outside, children played in a yard across the street. Normal life happening while I documented theft of a dying woman's final gift. I'll pick up the documentation at 3. I hung up and called Brian Yates. He answered on the first ring. Patrick, everything okay? I need you to examine some documents. Trust violation analysis. Come by my office at 4. Claire worked through lunch creating indexed exhibits. Each forged signature got its own numbered tag. Each timeline correlation received color coding. Red for trust withdrawals, blue for luxury purchases, green for Instagram documentation. By 2 p.m., her work table looked like a federal prosecution file. This exceeds postal inspection standards, she said. You could take this to any U.S. attorney and they'd file charges within a week. I'm taking it to Toledo PD first. Keep it local. Detective Hughes in financial crimes. Former military police. She'll appreciate documentation quality. I collected the therapy center documents at 3. The director gave me 47 pages of invoices, payment records, and handwritten notes from Helen's final visit. Helen had walked in with her oxygen tank, the director said. Made the staff promise. Brian examined the forged signatures at 4. He spread them across his desk next to the trust documents Helen had dictated to him during her final months, her specifications filling 3 legal pads. These violate fiduciary duty in 18 separate counts, he said. The trust explicitly prohibited anyone except you from authorizing disbursements. Each forgery is a felony. Theft from a disabled person's medical fund carries enhanced penalties. Elder financial exploitation adds another enhancement. What's the exposure? 8 to 12 years if prosecuted fully, plus mandatory restitution of $340,000 plus interest. I picked up Helen's trust documents. Her brother had drafted them with the same meticulous care she'd brought to everything. She knew this mattered. My sister spent her last conscious weeks protecting Mason's future. What Vanessa did wasn't just theft, it was desecration. Monday morning, I met Detective Ramona Hughes at Toledo PD headquarters. She was 41, with the bearing of someone who'd spent years in military police. She reviewed the evidence package for 90 minutes without speaking. Forged signatures, forensic analysis, bank security footage, timeline correlations, Instagram documentation, therapy center records, expert testimony from Brian. She set down the last exhibit, looked at me. This is the most organized case file I've seen outside federal prosecution. You could teach my investigators about documentation. 30 years with the Postal Inspection Service. It shows. What you have here is systematic elder financial exploitation, 18 felony counts of forgery, theft from a disabled person's trust with enhanced penalties. Everything supported by bank footage and forensic analysis that meets every prosecutorial standard. When can you move? Sunday dinner at your home. We'll have units outside when you give the signal. I spent the next 3 days turning my home office into an investigation center. Timeline charts filled the corkboards, red lines connecting each withdrawal to Vanessa's Instagram posts. The filing cabinets held indexed exhibits, each one tagged and cross-referenced. Helen's oak dining table became a command center for witness statements and expert testimony documentation. The work channeled grief into purpose. Every spreadsheet honored Helen's memory. Every timeline chart matched the systematic planning she'd brought to Mason's medical projections. Kyle texted asking if Sunday dinner was still happening. Vanessa had mentioned, I seemed more open to reconciliation. I confirmed 6 o'clock. Saturday evening, Jason stopped by to help install new cabinets in my workshop. We worked in comfortable silence, measuring and mounting with the rhythm of 2 people who'd done this before. Heard you're having Kyle and Vanessa over tomorrow, he said. Yes. He set down his drill. You sure you're ready for this? I looked at the evidence boxes stacked in my home office. Detective Hughes had her units ready. Brian had his expert testimony prepared. Claire had her forensic analysis documented to federal standards. I'm ready. After Jason left, I walked through the house one more time. Helen's butterfly collection still displayed in shadow boxes throughout the living room. Her books organized by color on the shelves. Her reading chair by the window, where she'd spent afternoons with novels and crossword puzzles. Everything was ready to honor what Helen had tried to protect. What Vanessa thought she could steal while an old man mourned. I spent Tuesday cataloging the remaining signatures before making the call. I confirmed the dinner invitation on Wednesday evening while Detective Hughes coordinated arrest logistics from her office downtown. Mason couldn't be present when his mother was arrested. 7 years old didn't need that memory. We'll have 2 units outside, Hughes said over the phone. I'll enter through your front door at 1800 hours, unless you signal earlier. Understood. I hung up and dialed Vanessa's number. She answered on the second ring. Patrick, how are you? I've been thinking about what you said. About moving forward. Why don't you and Kyle come for Sunday dinner? We can clear the air. Her voice brightened. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. 6 o'clock work for you? That works. I'll bring that organic Pinot you mentioned. I woke Sunday to clear skies. 62 degrees. Good weather for what was coming. I spent the morning preparing Helen's pot roast recipe. The smell of browning beef and caramelized onions filled the house, same as it had for 15 years of family dinners. The one she'd made for every family gathering. Helen's grandmother's oak table seated 8. I used the good china and cloth napkins. Formal occasion required proper presentation. Vanessa's BMW X5 pulled into the driveway at 5:58. She emerged with wine bottle in one hand, wrapped toy in the other, designer sunglasses pushed into her hair. Confident, like she'd already won. Kyle followed her up the walkway, carrying Mason's overnight bag. The boy would stay with Kyle's sister tonight. I opened the door before they knocked. "Come in." Vanessa's smile was practiced and camera-ready. She wore designer casual wear. Lululemon jacket, pressed slacks, leather boots that cost what I made in a week. The Cartier bracelet caught the light when she handed me the wine bottle. "This is from that vineyard we discussed last month. The sommelier said it pairs beautifully with roast." I'd never discussed wine with her, but I took the bottle anyway. Kyle looked tired. 3 weeks on the road to Phoenix showed in his posture and the shadows under his eyes. He set Mason's bag by the door and glanced at me with something I couldn't quite read. "Dad." "Kyle, good to see you." Mason hugged my leg. The boy smiled up at me, clutching his new toy. 10 minutes later, Kyle's sister arrived to pick him up. Mason went happily, already showing her the wrapped gift. The door closed behind them. I served appetizers in the living room, cheese and crackers. Helen used to arrange with geometric precision. We made small talk about Kyle's recent routes. Nevada highway construction. Arizona heat that melted tar off the roadbed. Normal conversation that tasted wrong in my mouth. Vanessa floated trial balloons between bites of aged cheddar. "This house must be such a burden to maintain, Patrick." "All these stairs, the yard work. I manage." "There are wonderful assisted living communities now, where you'd have social opportunities, community activities. No maintenance stress." Kyle frowned at his wife, but said nothing. I brought the pot roast to the table at 6:30. Served it with roasted vegetables and Helen's dinner rolls that I'd learned to make from her handwritten recipe cards. Vanessa filled the silence with observations about real estate market trends and her latest property listing. Her voice had that practiced quality from years of sales presentations. Kyle ate without speaking, watching me with that same unreadable expression. I set down my fork, reached for the burgundy folder I'd placed on the sideboard before they arrived. I pulled the first 3 forms from the folder and slid them across Helen's oak table. "I need you to explain these signatures." Vanessa glanced at the forms. Her smile faltered. "What?" "These withdrawal authorizations from Mason's Medical Trust. First National Bank. My signature on each one." My tone went ice cold. Federal investigator voice. "Explain them." Her expression shifted. Confusion to defensiveness in 3 seconds. "Patrick, what are you doing?" "Asking you to explain my signatures on bank documents I never signed." Kyle stared at the forms without touching them, color draining from his face. Vanessa's voice rose. "This is insane. You're having some kind of episode, and I think we need to get you evaluated because this paranoid accusation is textbook elder abuse." I pulled additional forms from the folder, laid them across the table between the pot roast and dinner rolls. 18 withdrawal authorizations. Total disbursement of $340,000 from Mason's Medical Trust, each one supposedly bearing my signature. Kyle, your father is not well. We need to call someone. Kyle set down the form. These have Dad's signature. Forged signatures. I kept my tone ice cold. Your pen pressure is inconsistent. My capital D loops counterclockwise. Yours goes clockwise. You included my middle initial on 4 forms. I haven't used that initial in a signature since 1982. Vanessa stood. Her chair scraped against hardwood. Voice rising, hands moving faster. Kyle, your father is not well. This is crazy. I've been nothing but supportive while you've fallen apart, and this is how you repay me? I pulled the final exhibit from the folder. Printed screenshot with timestamp. Bank security footage. March 14th. You sat at the lobby counter practicing my signature on deposit slips. 6 attempts before you got something close enough. Her face drained of color. I spent 3 decades identifying forged signatures for federal prosecution. Your practice attempts are on the bank's lobby camera from March 14th. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. Kyle's hand stopped moving toward the form. His jaw went slack, eyes fixed on the signatures without blinking. Dad saying you forged his signature 18 times. 18. That's not a mistake. He's confused. The grief has made him paranoid, and we need to get him help before he hurts himself or someone else. I set the screenshot on top of the withdrawal forms. You want to keep talking, or would you like to wait for your attorney? The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock. Detective Hughes stood on my front porch with 2 uniformed officers. She held up the arrest warrant. Vanessa turned white. What is this? Vanessa Drummond, you're under arrest for 18 counts of forgery, elder financial exploitation, and theft from a disabled person's medical trust. Hughes read from the warrant while the officers moved into position. You have the right to remain silent. This isn't real. Kyle, tell them this isn't real. Kyle sat frozen at Helen's table. His hands rested flat against the oak surface where his mother used to serve Sunday dinners. Palms down, fingers spread. Not moving. Hughes continued reading rights while one officer produced handcuffs. Vanessa kept talking, voice rising to panic. Patrick is having dementia episodes. He doesn't understand what he's saying. Someone needs to evaluate him because this is elder abuse, and I've been trying to help him. I remained seated at the head of the table, hands steady, voice calm. Detective Hughes has reviewed all documentation. Forensic signature analysis by Claire Ostrowski, former Postal Inspection Service colleague. Bank security footage. Timeline correlation between trust withdrawals and your luxury purchase Instagram posts. Expert testimony from Brian Yates regarding fiduciary duty violations. The officer fastened the handcuffs. Vanessa's designer clothes and hair looked wrong against the metal restraints. 3 minutes passed. Kyle stared at the evidence spread across Helen's table. When he spoke, his voice came out flat. You stole from our son's medical fund, the trust Mom set up during her last months. Vanessa didn't answer. The officers led her toward the front door while Detective Hughes collected the evidence folder from the table. We'll need your formal statement tomorrow, Mr. Drummond. 9 a.m. Hughes nodded and followed her officers out. The door closed behind them. Kyle and I sat alone at Helen's table. The pot roast had gone cold, wine glasses untouched. Good china reflecting the overhead light. I didn't know, Kyle said. I know. All those roots. I thought she was handling things while I was gone. I looked at my son across the table, where his mother used to serve family meals, where Helen had spent her last Thanksgiving showing Mason how to fold napkins into triangles. She made choices. Now she faces consequences. Kyle nodded, said nothing else. We sat in Helen's dining room for 20 minutes without speaking. Finally, Kyle stood, grabbed his keys, and left without looking back. Justice served at the table where family dinners used to happen. Sunday night, Vanessa was processed into county jail. Detective Hughes called Tuesday morning. Vanessa's still inside, she said. Bail set at $100,000. Cash or bond. She doesn't have either. I set my coffee mug on the kitchen counter. The morning light caught the water stains I'd been meaning to clean for weeks. Understood. Her luxury real estate agency suspended her by noon. Pending the outcome of criminal charges, their statement said, professional standards and client trust required immediate action. The Ohio Real Estate Commission initiated license review that afternoon. Theft from a disabled child's medical fund violated ethics requirements. Permanent revocation proceedings began within 48 hours of her arrest. I received the notifications in my home office while organizing asset recovery documentation. Each email confirmed what systematic thinking predicted. Actions have consequences. Theft destroys trust. Fraud ends careers. Kyle's divorce filing proceeded through court Wednesday morning. Irreconcilable differences. Primary custody of Mason. His attorney cited Vanessa's theft from their son's medical trust as evidence of parental unfitness. The custody hearing lasted 20 minutes. Judge reviewed the criminal charges, the forged signatures, the discontinued therapy sessions. Granted Kyle primary custody. Vanessa received supervised visitation rights she couldn't exercise from county jail. Brian called that afternoon. The court approved your civil recovery petition. You can pursue her remaining assets for restitution. What's left to pursue? Luxury SUV has $32,000 remaining on the loan. Designer handbags might fetch 15% of retail at auction. Jewelry. Her half of marital assets Kyle's willing to transfer. I made notes while he talked. The math wouldn't recover everything. Most of the $340,000 had been spent on experiences that couldn't be liquidated. European vacation, cosmetic procedures, restaurant meals, gone. But recovering something mattered. Every dollar back in Mason's trust honored what Helen tried to protect. The trial began 6 weeks after the arrest. Prosecutors presented Claire's forensic analysis first. Digital overlays showing my legitimate signatures next to Vanessa's forgeries. Statistical probability under 2%. Mathematical certainty of fraud. Claire took the stand. Same steel-rimmed glasses. Same gray pantsuit she'd worn to federal cases for 30 years. The prosecutor asked about the forgeries. Claire didn't hesitate. The defendant's forgeries contained consistent technical failures. Wrong pen pressure, incorrect baseline angle, capital letter formations that approximate shape but miss muscle memory patterns built over decades. Vanessa's attorney tried cross-examination about margin of error. Claire destroyed the attempt with precision I recognized from our postal inspection days. There is no margin of error here. These signatures were not made by Patrick Drummond. That's not opinion. That's forensic fact. Prosecutors showed the bank security footage next. Margaret had also provided this evidence along with the withdrawal forms. March 14th, 2:47 p.m., Vanessa at the writing counter with blank deposit slips. 6 practice attempts. Checking her phone between forgeries. No one spoke. Juror 3 stopped taking notes. The court reporter's fingers paused on her keyboard. Prosecutors presented Claire's timeline correlation spreadsheets showing each trust withdrawal linked to Vanessa's luxury purchases within 72 hours. $8,000 withdrawn. September 12th. Prada handbag posted September 14th. $35,000 withdrawn March 8th. European vacation spanning March 10th through 28th. Instagram screenshots filled the prosecution's presentation monitors. Designer shopping bags tagged with #TreatYourself. Vacation photos captioned #LivingMyBestLife. Cosmetic procedure results labeled #self-care. All of it funded by Mason's discontinued therapy sessions. The therapy center director testified Thursday morning. The director paused mid-sentence, studying her notes. When she continued, her words came slower. Mrs. Drummond came in May 2022. Oxygen tank. Could barely walk, but she came anyway because her grandson's future mattered that much. She described Helen's final visit, arranging Mason's entire schedule through 2024, repaying 6 months to ensure continuity. She made me promise we'd take care of him. Vanessa's attorney had no questions. I testified Friday, explained my postal inspection background. 3 decades examining forged documents for federal prosecution. The training that made spotting amateur forgeries routine work. The defendant included my middle initial on 4 separate forms, I said. I haven't used that initial in a signature since 1982. Anyone familiar with my actual signature patterns would know that. The prosecutor asked about my relationship with Vanessa before the theft. She offered to help with paperwork during my grief. I appreciated it at the time. Didn't recognize systematic reconnaissance for what it was. Guilty verdict came Monday. All counts. 18 felony forgeries. Elder financial exploitation with enhanced penalties. Theft from a disabled person's trust. Sentencing happened 2 weeks later. The judge looked at Vanessa over his reading glasses. You stole from your disabled son, forged signatures, stopped his therapy, documented it all on Instagram. 8 years state prison. Mandatory restitution of $340,000 plus interest. Vanessa said nothing. Her designer clothes had been replaced by County Jail orange weeks earlier. Perfect hair and makeup gone. Cartier bracelet seized during asset recovery. Civil proceedings moved faster than criminal trial. The bank repossessed the luxury SUV she'd purchased with the final withdrawal and sold it at auction. $31,000 recovered after loan payoff. Designer handbags brought $8,000 total, 15% of what Vanessa paid. The Cartier bracelet sold for $6,200. Jewelry depreciated fast when the story behind it involved stealing from a disabled child. Kyle transferred Vanessa's half of their marital assets without contest. Joint savings account. Her portion of the 401k, the timeshare in Sedona they'd bought 2 years ago. Another $42,000 toward restitution. total recovery came to $89,000. 26% of what she'd stolen. The rest had been spent on experiences that couldn't be liquidated or items that depreciated to nothing. Her real estate colleagues distanced themselves in public statements. Professional reputation required separation from scandal. The luxury agency that once featured her prominently removed all photos from their website. The Instagram account that once showed designer purchases and European vacations became evidence. Screenshots in court, timeline charts. Local news ran the Vanessa Drummond Homes handle with headlines about stealing from disabled grandson. Engagement dropped to 0. Comments filled with outrage. Local media covered the sentencing. Luxury real estate agent steals from disabled grandson's medical fund. 8 years in prison. The story ran for 3 days. Made her name synonymous with exploiting family trust. Her parents never came to court. The bailiff said they'd called once, asked when sentencing was scheduled, then hung up. No visitor logs, no money posted for bail. The factory worker and waitress she'd spent 15 years avoiding stayed in Cleveland. I transferred the recovered $89,000 back to Mason's medical trust the day after final asset liquidation, supplementing the remaining principal Helen had established. Called the therapy center that afternoon. This is Patrick Drummond. Mason's sessions can resume next week. The trust account is current and protected. The director's relief came through the phone line. We'll schedule him for next week. Same therapists if possible. I hung up and walked to my workshop. 200 restored fountain pens in their glass cases. Helen's leather journal on the workbench beside my magnifying glass. Her handwriting visible through the open pages. One entry near the end, written when her hand could barely hold the pen, only for Mason's medical needs. Never anything else. The work I'd done, documenting signatures, building evidence, honoring what she'd planned, had worked. Mason's therapy sessions would continue. Helen's dying gift would serve its intended purpose. The trust fund would be protected by enhanced security protocols, preventing anyone except me from authorizing disbursements. Everything Vanessa valued had been destroyed by the same crimes she committed to obtain it. Designer lifestyle funded by theft led to poverty and prison. Performance of devoted motherhood while stealing from her son led to supervised visitation she couldn't exercise. Exploitation of elderly grief led to defeat by federal investigator expertise. The balance was precise, complete, just. 18 months after Vanessa's arrest, I sat at my workshop bench with Mason beside me. The boy held the 1934 Waterman barrel up to the window light, tongue stuck between his teeth while he examined the feed channel. See how decades of dried ink clog it? I pointed with the tip of my smallest screwdriver. We clean it with patience, not force. Mason nodded and set the barrel down carefully. His hands moved slower than mine, but steadier than last month. The occupational therapist's projection was proving accurate. Kyle appeared in the doorway holding 2 coffee mugs. Saturday morning ritual we'd started 3 months back. He handed me the mug, black coffee, no sugar, the way I'd taught him to make it when he was 12. Some things didn't need words. That's the 3rd pen this month, Kyle said. He's getting good at this. Grandpa's teaching me to see how patient work makes something broken into something that works again, Mason said. Kyle smiled. and leaned against the doorframe. We'd been having these quiet moments since the trial ended, processing what Vanessa had done, what Mom had protected, finding our way forward through honest conversation instead of avoiding hard truths. "Your grandmother said the same thing about her butterflies," I told Mason. "Patient waiting leads to something beautiful." The boy picked up the nib and examined it under the magnifying glass. His concentration matched Helen's when she'd arranged her butterflies. Same methodical patience. Same refusal to rush the delicate work. The workshop smelled of linseed oil and metal polish. Afternoon light caught the dust motes drifting between 200 catalogued pens in their glass cases. I'd stopped avoiding Helen's reading chair months ago, kept her books organized by color on the shelves. Her butterfly collection still displayed throughout the house. Her presence felt different now, not the sharp absence that used to wake me at 3 a.m., but something gentler. A reminder instead of a wound. The trust fund protected. Mason's therapy continuing without interruption. His future secure through spreadsheets and medical projections that proved documentation triumphed over manipulation. I'd supplemented the remaining trust principal from my own accounts after the asset recovery, ensuring Mason's full projected needs through age 18 were covered. Helen's planning had accounted for every contingency except systematic theft by someone who should have honored her dying wishes. "This part goes here?" Mason held up the feed. "Test it first. Make sure the alignment's correct." He squinted at the mechanism and made a small adjustment. Got it right on the second try. Kyle watched his son work with quiet pride. We'd host dinner tomorrow at Helen's oak table. The three of us together. Same table where Vanessa had sat 17 months ago. Designer clothes against County Jail orange now. Same chairs, different family. I retrieved the gift box from my drawer while Mason cleaned the feed channel. Inside was the restored Waterman with a handwritten note card. "From your grandma Helen, who taught us that patient waiting leads to something beautiful. Love, Grandpa." Mason read it twice before carefully testing the pen's ink flow. The nib moved smoothly across paper. Perfect pressure, no skips. He tested 3 more strokes, checking each one for consistency before nodding. "It works perfect, Grandpa." Vanessa had seen a widower avoiding paperwork, not a postal inspector who'd built federal cases from paper trails. She'd confused temporary isolation with permanent vulnerability. Assumed my systematic thinking had died with Helen, leaving an exploitable old man who wouldn't notice or couldn't fight back. But 30 years of training had built habits that functioned independent of emotional state. Documentation protocols and evidence examination skills didn't disappear just because the person who'd given my life meaning was gone. I watched my grandson examine the restored pen with the same careful attention his grandmother once showed. Mason's careful ink strokes on the test paper. Helen's spreadsheets in the filing cabinet. Both precision, both love. 3 generations connected by her methodical planning. Documentation and preparation honoring memory better than revenge ever could.